Magandang gabi sa atin lahat. Welcome again sa isang episode ng Walang Plastikan sa isang Friday the 13th. So hindi tayo superstitious. We don't believe it is a problem for us. However, para sa ating kalikasan, it's like every day is Friday the 13th kasi always being polluted, exploited, and destroyed. And so we need to really change this, and important is our mindset, our thinking. We really need to be passionate about saving the earth, as it is God's creation. He has entrusted it to us as good stewards. And so today we will talk with Jasmine Kwong, who is creation care advocate. She is passionate about marine conservation and also about food related issues. Si Jazz, as we call her, is from Canada, pero dito siya nakatira ngayon sa Pilipinas. Ang kanyang background is in conservation biology and community development. And so her passion is about how can we develop people and the environment at the same time. And just recently, in June 2021, she received a graduate diploma in intercultural and urban studies from Asian Theological Seminary. So congrats, Just the belated congrats sa iyong graduation. So wonderful what you have achieved. And now please join us in listening to Jasmine Kwong.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Peter.
Thank you, Jas. We are grateful that you are with us, So would be good to hear a little bit about yourself. Maybe you can use 3 different words to describe yourself.
Well, that's always a fun question to try answering. I would say maybe one description I would give myself is enthusiastic. I'm someone that really loves to bring energy and passion into what I do. I would call myself a catalyst for change. I would also describe myself as relatable. I really love interacting with different people, and for me, it's a big joy to be able to share my life and also stories with others, to hear them, to share them, and just to share life. And then the third one, perhaps I'd call myself determined. I'm also an advocate for issues that I care about, but I think over the years, I've also learned, more importantly, I'm an advocate for issues that God cares about.
Wow, that's wonderful. And as far as I got to know you, I can second the motion that I've experienced you with these wonderful full attributes. And I think those are very important in the work that you are doing, and that in conservation and in creation care with faith. And as you have become this creation care advocate, I would like to know if you could share with us a few important milestones in your life journey that have brought you where you are now, that have opened your eyes or really arose that passion in you for doing God's work.
Yeah, I think for sure my story goes back to earlier days, even from my younger years. One very significant milestone for me was actually a time that I spent scuba diving in the Pacific Ocean in Western Canada. And that was back when I was in high school. I was always very thankful that my parents encouraged me to pursue my interests and to harness them towards my future, because I always had a dream of becoming a marine biologist. So when I had this opportunity to go out to the west coast of Canada and to do a cold water dive, it was only 4 degrees Celsius temperature. I remember that.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the neoprene wetsuits. That was very important. But I really will not forget swimming alongside the marine life that was there. And I was told it's one of the better cold water dives in the world. And the embodied experience of being alongside of God's creation. I think about that expression, seeing is believing. Just spending time in God's creation helped me to cultivate a sense of wonder about God's world. And up until now, I still have a fascination with marine life. And here in the Philippines, I enjoy scuba diving when I can, but much more thankful that the water is warmer here in the tropics. But another milestone for me was actually time that I got to spend living cross-culturally in Southeast Asia during my university years. I think for me, crossing cultures and spending time among different people who live in different contexts helped me to see life in different settings. I learned about myself. I also learned different realities, different challenges that people face on a regular basis. And to the point, especially because I did spend that time more in this region of the world, I consider Southeast Asia to be my heartland. Mm-hmm. And I think something else is that over the years, I've also had occasions to work in diverse teams. I think especially in my years working in food and justice related issues, I got to really work with people who were inspired, working towards common goals, while at the same time, we would offer our different perspectives and skill sets. So for example, in my food work, I had colleagues that approached food from a health perspective. So they talked to me about diet and food preferences. And then in other contexts, I work with urban planners, and they'd help me to see things about the placement of parks or farmland. And then for my sociology colleagues, it was looking at food traditions or how food knowledge is passed down. And then for myself, I would look at education and community development. So looking at food access and food choice. And for me, it was in working with people with similar passions of advocacy and justice that helped me to sort of realize, wow, it's quite significant to work towards a common goal. And then more recently, for me, it's been the value of working with people who share the same faith in Jesus. Yeah.
Wow, though there's a lot of important milestones that you experienced, and they could have brought you in all kinds of different directions. If you think about it, you've been involved in a lot of different stuff, and it could have brought you this way, or it could have brought you that way. But in the end, you ended up being passionate about conservation and creation care. So what do you think what tipped the balance in favor for you to say, okay, I'm going that way? And it's like, right, a lot of people think about creation care, but they always think, oh, somebody needs to do something about it, and then but you came to the point and said, I need to do something about it. And so how did you get to that decision?
Yeah. And, to be honest, it's not easy to give that answer very clearly, because I feel if I look back at my journey and my story, actually, like I opened with, I felt that some of these things began when I was young. But it's the fact that even though I was introduced to some of these things when I was younger, it took me so many years to make that realization. And you started this segment today by sort of talking a bit about mindset. And I feel that's sort of the journey that I went on, because since I was young, I had a fascination with the created world. I was always outside, always exploring and looking, and I always had this dream to do something in nature. And even when I met people that I was inspired by, I felt, oh, I would like to follow in their footsteps. I want to do the work that they do. And so I'm thankful. I did actually work in the area of conservation, and I think the exposure of the workplace, of working with colleagues and others who'd gone ahead of me in that field, helped me to see, wow, it takes that kind of dedicated effort. It's also long and difficult. But it was also in that time period that I was exposed to a different side of conservation that at the time I didn't connect all the dots yet. So there is a piece missing for me. And what ended up happening was, I remember, for example, I had a professor who did research on one particular bird called the marbled murrelet. I haven't forgotten. And it's a type of seabird that happens, that occurs on the western part of North America. And I just remember this professor was so passionate about this bird. She talked on and on about her research about it. And she said that, she had spent so many years of her life protecting this bird species. But then in her storytelling, I started to hear some bitterness and frustration against people. And I thought, this is interesting. I'm doing conservation about wildlife, but I'm hearing antagonism to people. So I was a bit confused because she was saying, we would fight the foresters about this. We'll lobby against the government. I'm angry at people that don't seem to care about this bird because it's so important. And I thought, interesting. How can I get into conservation on a topic that seems to be divisive for people? And that's how I sort of ended up in the food issue related work, because I found that food became a unifying topic that looked at both issues about the environment because of land and how a lot of food grows on the land or in the water. But at the same time, it connects to issues related to people, including basic survival. And then I thought, okay, this is interesting. How can I now look at good food for all and still be looking at these issues related to being a Christian? Here I am thinking about conservation, caring about God's world, but then meeting people who are angry at people, working in the field of food, and then meeting people who didn't seem to have the same faith as me in God. So I thought, this is strange. There's not this connection. But it took a long, long time in my own journey to finally come back full circle and then go, wait a minute, these issues actually intersect, and my faith is linked with this topic. So I feel convicted about caring for creation is more than just what I've studied. It's actually part of something deeper.
Wow, yeah. I think that's a very important. You put your finger on a number of very important topic that also important for me, that food and poverty that is also related, and so people who are poor and hungry, for them to take care of the creation is a luxury that they can't afford because they have to take care for their own survival. And so how can you balance it, that you provide livelihood or food security for people at the same time in a way that is also sustainable for the planet? And I agree with you. There are people who are basically to the extreme. They're getting so angry that they're saying we need to extinguish humanity so that the planet can survive, and from a faith perspective, that is something you would absolutely find horrifying as that you can think that way, even though sometimes I could understand it, but I think from the faith and perspective, the mindset, I would like you to expound more. In what way is your faith bringing it all together for you? Because that's also not something natural. Many people, they would say, we need to save souls and not trees, So for them, faith and creation care is something not really related. But and I think it is important to discuss that,
Yes, I really agree that the discussion on these kinds of issues is sometimes sparse. And I think sometimes it's related to the fact that there's a disconnect between some of these issues that are very real in society, and it's a reality for a lot of different communities around the world. And yet in Christian circles, for some reason, it still seems to be as if it's not included in our conversation in faith, when what has been very fascinating for me is making the discovery of actually how intricately connected it is to our faith, and even in the Bible. So for me, again, in my personal story, it's taken a long time to find those intersections, because I grew up with Christian faith in my upbringing, but at the same time, as I went into my studies and my professional work, a lot of that didn't seem to intersect. I found that I was in these two different spheres that didn't seem to overlap. But over time, it was through gradual introductions to like-minded people, both people who shared faith, but also were engaged in some of these topics, like creation care or like justice issues. And then I realized actually it was taking time to discover God in those topics. So putting aside my own personal interest and passion and realizing, wait a minute, God cares about issues of justice. God cares about his creation, not just Jasmine. And I had to make the acknowledgement that my compassion would run out. My effort wouldn't be enough. And I know I cannot personally save the planet. And so actually it was a reframing of a lot of issues that I'd sort of grown up hearing about. Even though I was passionate and engaged, I had to realign them with God's greater vision of redemption and reconciliation for all. And in some ways, I had to reframe my theology to better understand how God's plan and purpose is actually for all of creation. I think for me, I would share an example. I had the opportunity to participate in a food theology course. And this was when I was still living in Canada. I had a chance for 2 weeks to stay at my professor's farm on an island in the west coast of Canada. And in our mornings, we were spending time to read scripture, read from the Bible, and actually passages that I had been familiar with, but very much from the perspective of seeing God at work through the provision of food. So for example, reading Genesis and looking at the garden and seeing the abundance of what was available, to the story in Exodus about manna and quail that was provided for the Israelites in the time of wilderness. And then you can move all the way ahead to the New Testament, looking at John chapter 21, when Jesus serves breakfast to his disciples at the beach after a full night of fishing. It's his invitation. And I think for me, and then in that class, in the afternoons, we would spend time actually gardening together outside. We would cook our meals together and then eat around the table. And it was actually the practice of table fellowship that reminded me how even Jesus's ministry centered a lot on eating meals with other people. So at one moment in the course, we actually slaughtered a lamb, which we gradually ate over the 2 weeks together. And it was a very significant time to actually think about how precious life is. The fact that a life was taken so that we could continue living. And then it got us thinking about Jesus, the spotless lamb that we often use as the metaphor, who gave his life so that we may live. So for me, even a very basic daily act of eating our meals became a place for me to reflect about God's provision and our relationship with the rest of creation. So thinking about the quality of food that we're eating, that's important. Being present at the table with people who sit with us, that's very significant. And then communing with our Creator, that's worship. So for me, the intersection between faith and caring for creation now is very linked even in my everyday activities.
Wow, that's very, very powerful, Jess. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that that often we take food for granted, or we eat food that we shouldn't be eating, or we grow the food that we shouldn't grow it, and to be much more aware of it. And it's also the same even with like our advocacy here with plastic, that it's the same, and so much food is now actually also packaged in plastic,
Right.
to the perversion that even bananas, already packaged by God, already packaged again with plastic, and you're thinking, my God, what are we doing? And so what would be interesting to know, you are Canadian, now you are in the Philippines. How long have you been there?
I've been here over 4 years.
4 years. So would you like to share with us what brought you to the Philippines? Was it only the warm water, or was there more behind it?
That was a good reason, for sure. Yeah, actually, my first time in the Philippines was before this last stint. Years ago, I was actually involved with the human rights agency that was focused on the exploitation of women and children. So actually, it was a very difficult topic that first brought me to the country. And I have to admit, it was exposure for me to really see an area of humanity that's quite dark and broken. But I think it was very precisely the fact that I was engaged in a very difficult topic that actually allowed me to also see the beauty in this country, both in terms of people, but also the geography of this place. I lived with a dive master at that time. So
Wow.
lucky for me
I
to
envy you
take a
for
break.
that.
To take a break from some of that difficult work. Yeah, we would go diving on the weekends. And for me, then it was also very healing to spend time again just being exposed to the marine life. And of course, I know that the Philippines has one of the highest biodiversity rates in the world. Many species that are found, and it's also situated in the Coral Triangle. Many plants and animals found only here and nowhere else. And for me, that's been mind-blowing to see animals that I've never seen anywhere else. So anyway, when I finished my time with that human rights agency, I actually had this desire to return to the Philippines one day, if God permitted, but I didn't realize it would be in the capacity of my previous training and working in a Christian context. So for me, that's been really exciting to see the intersection finally coming together. So now my focus is doing creation care advocacy. And it's been really exciting to think about it from a Christian biblical perspective, which is not looking just at environment. It's not just nature, but looking at our relationship with God as creator and our relationship with one another as humans, and then our relationship with the rest of creation. So as an advocate, I'm witnessing incredible things happening in this country and with some of the new things that are emerging, both within Christian groups and others. So I'm really thankful to be here.
Wow, yeah. That's wonderful to hear that God brought you to the Philippines and that you can serve Him there in this particular function of being a creation care advocate. Would you like to share with us some of the initiatives you are involved with and what excites you about them?
Sure. Yeah, it's a little bit different now. Before the pandemic and all the lockdowns, I was visiting different initiatives around the country and getting to meet lots of people in person. But actually, at this moment, a lot of my current involvement is virtual. But I'm actually very grateful. In spite of that, I've been able to network and work with a lot of different Filipinos and also folks from other countries involved in creation care or topics related to that. So one group that I'm connected with is the Luzon WEA, or World Evangelical Alliance Creation Care Network. So that's been a good network of different people from different countries working in different areas, whether it's in a Christian context or in the area of theology and education, but could also be in actual conservation work or startups and things like that. So it's been really encouraging hearing about local initiatives and also thinking about regional efforts as well. But in terms of hearing some of the common issues, it's also been good to also hear from, for example, the fact that the Philippines is an island country and then meeting people from other island countries experiencing challenges with typhoons or rising sea levels or warming ocean temperatures, and then just hearing the discussions around that. Locally, I'm connected to a group called Christians in Conservation, which is an affiliated project of a larger Christian organization called Arasha International, which is a well-known Christian conservation organization. And here in the Philippines, we're focused on highlighting endemic species, so plants and animals that are found only in this country. And so they have one project, for example, that looks at planting native trees through a tribute program, which is basically a tribute program for people to plant trees during milestone events like a birthday or graduation. And they have a tree nursery where they have local varieties that are ready to plant. And then, just to share another variety of something that I've been doing, been able to help facilitate a creation care course at a local theological seminary in Davao. Thanks to the pandemic, I could do it while I'm in Manila and the students were in Davao. But it's really exciting to also see local pastors and lay leaders integrating creation care in both theology and practice. So that's just a small sampling of some of the connections and also networks I'm associated with. But what makes it exciting, honestly, is the fact that there are more locals and more Christians beginning to get engaged in this topic. For me, it's really inspiring to meet individuals and groups who are beginning to see the connection to this topic, not only in one specific area, but in a more integrated way. Um, and I see that as very important because none of us alone would save the planet. We know that that's Jesus's work, but each of us have a unique role to care for creation, however and wherever we are. So I love the fact that I can meet gardeners who are um, planting and helping to produce food that we eat. I love meeting divers who want to be involved with protecting coral reefs and helping local fishermen to maintain a sustainable livelihood. I love meeting entrepreneurs who are finding creative ways to reduce waste and upcycle products already in the system and explore things like circular economy. And I like artists who are helping to rediscover our mandate to create and reminding us to delight in the beauty of God's creation. So I think for me, it's the collectiveness of this topic that really excites me.
Yeah. Thank you, Jas. Just while you're sharing, we can feel your excitement, and it's somewhat contagious and wonderful to hear that. And some of the initiatives are also known to me. I was one of the founding members of Christians in Conservation, and
Yes, that's right. That's right.
that this is really taking on and growing, and about this tree nursery and this deforestation in the Philippines, that Christians are doing something about it. Planting trees and planting churches is not really something that is in opposite to each other. It's integrated. It's one good news of the Savior, who is also the Redeemer, and that is very powerful. Maybe just as my last question to you is now, what's your plan? What are the next milestones you are trying to move towards? What are you thinking? What's the future holding for you, or what would you like to do?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I find that the journey of creation care is like how Eugene Peterson says, it's a walk of obedience along a walk of obedience in the same direction, which is discipleship, Christian discipleship. And so for me, I want to continue seeing more Christians and local churches engaged in this topic, not just with words, but with actions. And that does mean that, hopefully encouraging us to have that willingness to examine our lifestyles and our priorities alongside of the way that we think, even about God. And at the same time, that also means integrating creation care in all aspects of our lives. It's not just a behavioral change, it really is a worldview change. And really thinking about how these issues are affecting our hearts and our minds as well, which honestly really might take a lifetime. But at the same time, for me, it's also seeing that people are connected to the places that they live. People can't only think about solutions that think about an individual or a neighborhood, although it's a good place to start. For example, if someone starts using a water bottle or eco bag, it's a good start. But at the same time, thinking about our connections to the land and also thinking about the impact on wildlife, being able to start taking an ecosystem approach about how life is actually interconnected. So in my role, I see myself as a catalyst, and even if I can use my background in food to help point people to the most obvious connection between people and land, which is something that we do every day when we eat the food at our tables, thinking about how we eat and how food connects us to our different relationships. I think in the end, it's about remembering that this is our Father's world. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So if I can be part of helping to encourage people to see that caring for creation is also part of our worship to God, that would be my heart's desire. It's not something that can be achieved overnight. I really think that's a long-term thing. But in this next season, I hope to have more engagement, not just at the local level, but with more regional and international engagement. And that's because I really believe it's collective action that will really help to move us forward. Yeah.
Amen to that, Jazz. Wonderful. It's really wishing you all the best in this endeavor, which is very important and which is also very, very close to my heart. I think we are really in the same spirit here and want to see that happen. And my prayers will be with you. It has really been lovely to talk to you and really enjoyed these 30 minutes together. And I hope our viewers were also inspired and learned a lot. And so, okay, there's something we can do. Each and every one of us can be an creation care advocate, because
Yes,
I think
amen.
our God in heaven is a creation care advocate. You know, he is the biggest one, and because it's his creation, you know. So of course he loves it and he advocates for it, and we are just his partners. We are just joining him, and we want more and more people to see that, to do that. And I think it is also a very urgent call to it, because creation suffers badly, you know, and if you don't do something soon, it will also backfire at us, and is already. And so all the best, Jazz, and thank you so much for your time. I hope we'll be keeping in touch, and
Absolutely.
we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Peter, for the invitation. It's been a joy to share this time with you.
Thank you. So to all our viewers, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat, and I hope marami kayong natutunan at enjoy ninyo ang aming usapang Walang Plastikan, and we'll be with you again in 2 weeks with a new guest and a new topic. So join us again when it's again time for Walang Plastikan. Take care. Have a great weekend, and God bless all of you. Bye.